Next up, apparently George is not a chipmunk, which is a good fact to know.
Or am I?
Oh, that'll have to come up on a future podcast. So we've got Dan talking about a greater than observer _
Yes. It ties in quite well, actually, to the AI conversation and the fact that we're talking about computer games as well, because basically this is set in the relatively near future, i.e. some of the characters that are turning up dead are born in kind of 2055, etc. So this is born at the end of this century. There's been a horrible disaster. A lot of people were chilling out in full immersion computer games and such, and then there was a big war and yada yada yada. It's the future, cyberpunk. There's a lot of modern day tech there, so there's kind of modern day looking cars, modern day looking CRT TV screens, but there's this kind of big high tech theme running through it as well, because it is very close to cyberpunk, but it's a dark and a gritty and a messy and a bloody one, which ties into obviously Bloober Team's previous releases, which were, I can't remember what they're called now. What was the series called? They made 2 of them.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm gonna have to look this up now. Either way, so they are known for their jump scares. They are known for making cinematic games with strong narratives that are very leading, and that works quite well in this setting because it's an unknown setting, just like a kind of horror setting, and you go through a claustrophobic apartment block, and you're trying to investigate what's happened to your son, and basically you find a body, and then you find another body and another body, and the plot thickens, and you're actually doing pretty close to detective work. You're interrogating people, albeit you're doing this by diving into their minds using your weird snake skull drill thing. And yeah, you're interrogating people, you're finding clues, which you do with a kind of like detective view. You've got 2 different scanners, one which can read chemicals and one which can read objects and find out information on them. It's quite it's a really interesting setting and a really interesting bunch of abilities, I suppose, that you've got, although I wouldn't call them abilities because you don't unlock them per se. But and it's something that I hope that they explore again. What I would say is I'm not particularly comfortable with jump scares. It wasn't a game that I was looking forward to getting, especially because I heard that with the previous game that they'd made, they had a habit of leading you down a corridor. Oh no, the door is locked. And as you turn around, it goes, wah! And somebody, appears directly next to you. And yeah, they do that a lot in this game. And yeah, I spent a lot of time walking through doors, deliberately looking at the floor, knowing that if I turn around sideways, I can't actually see what they're trying to get me to look at, etc. So I did play it like a little coward. But then there was a point, probably about a third of the way through the game, where the game actually killed me. Something came out of somewhere, grabbed me and killed me, was right up in my face, and that's it. I was dead. And all of a sudden, it all kind of, it lost its power over me, if that makes sense. It broke the fear of, oh my God, something's going to kill me, because something actually did just come out and kill me. And so yeah, it kind of lost its fear over me.
So the dying actually just made the game not as exciting?
Yeah, not as scary, not as tense. I mean, it's still got a nice tense vibe to it when you're exploring these claustrophobic hallways and going through this apartment block that used to be a normal, like, modern day apartment block, and they've blown through walls to make new corridors and bolted on these big electric doors as they've modernized what remains of these buildings. That feels tense. And sometimes people talk to you from behind these doors, and sometimes robots or something burst out and move around. But once it had killed me, at least, the kind of like, oh no, something's going to grab me and kill me effect was gone, because I knew that actually, that's not really that much of a punishment. It's just going to send me back to a checkpoint. And it kind of lost that immersion at that point. I can't think of any other games where that's happened. But then I don't play very many horror games, I've got to admit.
Was the story good? I mean, spoiler. I mean, was it good? Or was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was all a bit weird because, like I said, you're tracking down your son, and it's very much, like I said, detective work. You go somewhere, you find a body, you jack into it. I suppose jacking into it's probably the best term. And depending on how kind of drug-addled they were or how horrible their death was, or if they're a willing participant. You have experiences that are either, the first one is completely nuts. It's like literally walls being torn away from you, walk up to a glass window and a bird just flies, smashes into it, and random screaming people and you being chased through a prison and all sorts of bloody horrible things. But then later ones are relatively peaceful, and you kind of, you break the rules of the mind police by jacking into a corpse because you're so desperate to find your son, which is very hard to believe because Rutger Hauer's acting feels, he's got quite a gruff voice and quite a emotionless voice anyway, and sometimes he really does feel like he's just reading off a sheet of paper. But no, I thought the story was good. I thought the setting, like I said, was amazing. They play a lot with symbology, which is really, really good. Like all the way through the first bit of the game, there's DVDs and books and tapes about the genophage, which is this virus that gets into people's chips because 99% of what's left of humanity have implants, and it turns them mad and evil, and it can infect other people from being near them. And then there's also loads of stuff that's like anti-establishment because there aren't governments now, there's just businesses. And then there's also loads of stuff about werewolves, like loads and loads of stuff about werewolves. So it's almost impossible to not think, well, what if it's like a werewolf then? And you start seeing things moving out of the corner of your eye that are big and hulking, and you're like, it's a werewolf, isn't it? And then, and it does a really good job of leading you to believe things. And while I don't really like games that try and come across like they are controlling the situation and they know more than you, I do think that the team did a really good job with this one. And like I said, right up until I got killed, I was, looking at the floor as I rounded corners, and I was playing it really carefully and thoroughly. But yeah, once they killed me, that kind of fear did shake. But yeah, the setting was brilliant, and visuals were beautiful, and yeah, it's interesting. I hope they make more.
That's one thing I have to say. It sounded really cool, but I think cyberpunk as a genre has yet to have a really, really good game yet. Kind of one that kind of like picked up and everyone's played. I want to see that happen, for there to be a cyberpunk game that just really blows our minds.
Well, Project Red, or CD Projekt Red, are working on their next game, which is Cyberpunk 2077, which is obviously a similar time frame, although I believe it's a completely different, it's complete. Both of them are unrelated to William Gibson. Both of them are inventions of different places. Mike Pondsmith, I believe, came up with Cyberpunk 2077, and I think the other one was completely come up with by Bloober Team. Obviously, because it's CD Projekt Red, who have done amazing things and are very, very consistent, I'm expecting Cyberpunk 2077, which is due to launch probably just before 2077, knowing how much they've shown off. But yeah, I do think that Cyberpunk 2077, when it launches, could really be that breakthrough, and we could see a big interest in sci-fi. Because when times are tough geopolitically, people do turn to science fiction a lot as well. So we are on the cusp of a lot of science fiction stuff. I mean, the films are already there, aren't they? And we're starting to see it in TV shows as well. And as this kind of current surge of superhero films ends, we'll see even more science fiction stuff. And I think games will follow. And hopefully there'll be some cyberpunk stuff as well, because they can be really interesting games. It's a really good setting.
Oh, heck yeah. I completely agree.
The game name that I was trying to think of, the series name, was Layers of Fear.
Oh, that weird game. I played that for about 10 minutes and then went, nope. Just turned it off.
I'm guessing you stopped for similar reasons to the reason I really didn't want to pick up the game.
Yeah, it's creepy games. I stopped playing Amnesia before I even saw a monster, just because the atmosphere of that game is intense. And I just couldn't take it. I can't do scary games.
So will we be seeing a review on the website for this game, Dan?
Yeah, the review's probably about 90% written up. I've got to get a couple of more screenshots for it and transfer it over to the site. I'd imagine it will probably be up next week. If not that, then early the week after. So before September, one should think.
Awesome. Look forward to reading it.
Indeed. And with that, I think that heralds the end of this week's Big Boss Babble podcast.